The alarm bells rang through the monitoring station like the cry of a dying animal. Dr. Vextar's forearms moved quickly across the control panels as his large eyes focused on the data streaming across multiple screens. Something was very wrong. The Kepler-7 station sat on the edge of known space, watching for threats that might come from the dark void beyond the galaxy. For 200 years, nothing had ever come from out there. The space between galaxies was cold, empty, and deadly. No life could survive in that endless darkness. But now the sensors were screaming. "Computer, run the scan again," Vextar said in his soft voice. His species, the Kalari, were known for being calm and careful. They made good scientists because they never rushed to conclusions. The results came back the same. A signal had come from deep space, far beyond where any known civilization existed. The signal was weak but clear. More importantly, it was artificial. Someone had sent it. Vexitar's assistant, a young Kalari named Zixpa, hurried over with a data pad. "Sir, I've cleaned up the signal as much as possible. You need to hear this." The transmission crackled with static from its long journey through space. Then a voice came through, speaking in a language that made Vextar's blood run cold. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the UES Retribution. We're coming home." The words were spoken in ancient human, a dead language that no one had heard for 300 years, because there were no humans left to speak it. Vextar stared at the speakers, his forehands shaking slightly. This was impossible. Everyone in the galaxy knew the story. 3 centuries ago, the mighty Zephyrian Empire had launched a great cleansing war. They had destroyed dozens of primitive species that they saw as threats to galactic order. "The humans had been among the first to die, sir." Zixpa's voice was nervous. "What does it mean?" Vextar didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to his personal files and pulled up restricted research he had done decades ago. Before becoming a monitor technician, he had studied extinct civilizations. The humans had fascinated him. Most species in the galaxy saw them as primitive. They had barely left their home solar system when the Zephyrians found them. Their ships were slow and clumsy compared to galactic standards. Their weapons were basic chemical rockets and metal bullets. They should have been easy to destroy. But something about the human records had always bothered Vextar. Their history was full of wars, yes, but it was also full of something else. Survival. Humans had faced extinction dozens of times on their homeworld and had always found a way to continue. They adapted, they learned, and they never gave up. "Zixpa, contact the Galactic Council immediately," Vextar said. "Use emergency priority codes." "But sir, surely this is just some kind of mistake." "Maybe it's an old signal that got bounced off a pulsar or—" "No." Vexitar's voice was firm. "I've run every test. This signal is 3 days old. Someone sent it from a point in space that is currently 27 light-years beyond our galaxy's edge." He paused, looking at his young assistant. "And they sent it using technology we don't understand. The signal shouldn't have been able to reach them. Even with the most advanced communication systems known to galactic science, sending a message across that distance would take enormous amounts of power. The kind of power only available to the most advanced civilizations." While Zixpa sent the emergency message, Vextar returned to his human research files. He read through the Zephyrian military reports from the cleansing campaign. Something had always seemed odd about them. According to the official records, the Zephyrian fleet had arrived at the human homeworld of Earth expecting a great battle. The humans had a population of 11 billion and a small but growing space fleet. The Zephyrians had prepared for weeks of fighting. Instead, they found nothing, not just an empty planet. A planet that looked like it had been carefully evacuated. No bodies, no wreckage, no signs of panic or destruction. The human cities were intact but empty. Their orbital stations were powered down but undamaged. Even their small fleet of warships was gone. The Zephyrians had declared victory anyway. They claimed the humans had fled in terror and died in the cold void of space. The galactic community had accepted this explanation because it made sense. Where else could 11 billion humans go? But now Vextar was looking at the reports with new eyes. What if the humans hadn't fled in terror? What if they had left on purpose? His computer chimed with an incoming message from the Galactic Council. They wanted a full report immediately. Vextar began preparing his data, but his mind kept returning to one disturbing thought. The signal had identified itself as coming from a ship called the UES Retribution. In the old human language, retribution meant revenge. If the humans had somehow survived for 3 centuries in the void between galaxies, what had they been doing all that time? Vextar pulled up stellar maps showing the area where the signal had originated. It was a region of space that should have been completely empty. No stars, no planets, no resources, nothing that could support life. Yet something was out there. Something that could send signals across impossible distances using unknown technology. Something that was coming home after 300 years of exile. The Galactic Council's response arrived within hours. They were sending a science ship to investigate, but it would take months to reach the signal's origin point. In the meantime, they wanted Kepler-7 station to monitor for any additional transmissions. Vextar set up continuous scans of the region. For 3 days, nothing happened. Then on the 4th day, the sensors detected something that made him call an emergency council session. Long-range scanners were picking up a massive object moving through deep space. It was still months away from the galaxy's edge, but its size was unprecedented. The object was roughly spherical and appeared to be made of unknown materials. Most disturbing of all, it was decelerating from near light speed. No known civilization had ships that large or that fast. The engineering required would be beyond even the most advanced species in the galaxy. Vextar compiled his final report with growing dread. The evidence was clear, even if it seemed impossible. Humanity had not been destroyed 3 centuries ago. They had been preparing. As he sent his conclusions to the Galactic Council, Vextar remembered something from his human historical research. Humans had a saying, "Revenge is a dish best served cold." At the time, he had thought it was just another example of their primitive culture. Now he understood. The humans hadn't been destroyed. They had been patient, and after 300 years in the cold void between galaxies, they were finally coming home. The galaxy was about to learn what humans had become in those long, dark years, and Vextar suspected that nothing would ever be the same again. The emergency session of the Galactic Council began at dawn on the capital world of Nexus Prime. Representatives from 47 species gathered in the Great Chamber, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes under the artificial lights. Dr. Vextar stood at the central podium, his forearm steady despite the fear in his heart. Around him, the council members whispered among themselves in dozens of languages. Many seemed annoyed at being called away from their regular duties for what they assumed was a false alarm. The Zephyrian delegate, Commander Krathmore, was particularly vocal in his complaints. His species had ruled much of the galaxy for centuries, and they did not like having their time wasted. "This is ridiculous," he said in his harsh voice. "Humans have been extinct for 300 years. Everyone knows this." Council Speaker Mordun, an ancient being whose species was among the first to achieve space travel, called for order. "Dr. Vextar has requested emergency priority status for his report. We will hear what he has to say." Vextar activated the holographic display above the podium. The image showed the deep space region where his station had detected the transmission. "4 days ago, we received this signal," he said, playing the recording. Admiral Chen's voice filled the chamber. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the UES Retribution. We're coming home." Several council members laughed. Others looked annoyed. Commander Krathmore stood up from his seat. "This is obviously some kind of hoax. Probably pirates trying to scare shipping routes." "With respect, Commander," Vextar replied. "The signal originated from a point 27 light-years beyond our galaxy's edge. No pirate vessel could reach that location, and certainly not with the technology required to send such a clear transmission across that distance." He changed the display to show sensor readings. "Furthermore, we have detected a massive object approaching from deep space. Current estimates put its size at approximately 800 kilometers in diameter." The laughter stopped. Even the most advanced civilization in the galaxy had never built anything close to that size. The largest known vessels were perhaps 10 kilometers long at most. Council Speaker Morden leaned forward. "Are you certain of these measurements, Dr. Vextar?" "I have triple-checked all data. The object is real. It is massive. And it is moving at significant sublight speed toward our galaxy." Commander Krathmore's voice was angry now. "Even if this is true, which I doubt, it proves nothing about humans. They were a primitive species with basic technology. We destroyed their homeworld centuries ago." Vextar had been waiting for this moment. He changed the display again, this time showing classified Zephyrian military records that he had spent weeks obtaining through official channels. "Actually, Commander, your own records tell a different story." The chamber fell silent as the records appeared on screen. They showed the Zephyrian fleet's approach to Earth, their expectations of a great battle, and then the mysterious discovery of an empty world. According to these reports, Vextar continued, when your forces arrived at Earth, they found no humans. No bodies, no wreckage, no signs of battle. The planet appeared to have been carefully and completely evacuated. Crathmore's scaled face showed confusion. That's impossible. Where could 11 billion primitives go? They barely had ships capable of interplanetary travel. That's exactly what I've been wondering, Vextar said. The official report states that the humans fled and died in space. But there's no evidence of this. No debris fields, no distress signals, no bodies. An entire species simply vanished. He pulled up star charts showing the region of space beyond the galaxy. What if they didn't die? What if they had a plan? The council chamber erupted in discussion. Representatives from dozens of species argued among themselves about the implications. Some dismissed the idea as impossible. Others began to look worried. Speaker Morden called for quiet. Dr. Vextar, you're suggesting that humanity somehow survived in the void between galaxies for 3 centuries. How would that be possible? Vextar had studied human history more than anyone else in the galaxy. Humans have a unique characteristic among known species. They adapt. Their homeworld was unusually hostile, forcing them to develop incredible survival skills. They faced extinction events multiple times and always found ways to continue. He showed images of human historical records. They survived ice ages that would have killed most species. They survived plagues that destroyed entire continents. They survived global wars that turned their planet into a wasteland. And each time they didn't just survive, they came back stronger. But the void between galaxies is completely hostile, protested the Kalari representative. No resources, no energy sources, nothing but empty space and radiation. Unless they brought their own resources, Vextar replied quietly. The evacuation of Earth was complete. 11 billion people, plus all their technology, all their knowledge, all their industrial capacity. What could a determined species accomplish with those resources and 300 years to work with? The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Commander Crathmore was the first to speak, his voice uncertain for the first time. You're talking about an entire civilization surviving and growing in conditions that should be impossible. I'm talking about humans, Vextar said simply. A species that made surviving impossible conditions into an art form. He activated the final part of his presentation. Long-range sensor data showing the massive object's approach vector and estimated arrival time. Whatever this object is, it will reach the galaxy's edge in approximately 6 months. Given its size and the advanced technology required to build and operate it, we must assume it represents a significant threat. Or, said a small voice from the back of the chamber, it represents justice finally coming home. Everyone turned to look at the speaker. It was Dr. Yilneth, a quiet researcher who specialized in galactic history. The humans were not the only species destroyed in the Great Cleansing. The Zephyrians eliminated dozens of civilizations they deemed primitive or threatening. If humanity somehow survived, she didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone understood. The humans wouldn't just be coming home. They would be coming for answers. Commander Crathmore stood up abruptly. This is all speculation. Even if some humans survived, they were primitives. Their technology was centuries behind ours. They couldn't possibly pose a threat to the Zephyrian Empire. Dr. Vexitar looked at the Zephyrian commander with something that might have been pity. Commander, 300 years ago, humans were using chemical rockets and metal bullets. Now they're sending signals across impossible distances and building ships the size of moons. What do you think they've been doing with all that time? The session ended with no clear resolution, but the galaxy had been warned. Some species began quietly moving their fleets to defensive positions. Others started diplomatic preparations, hoping to avoid any conflict. The Zephyrians, however, remained confident. Their empire was the most powerful in the galaxy. They had crushed hundreds of rebellions and conquered thousands of worlds. Whatever was coming from deep space, they would handle it as they had handled every other threat. They had no idea that the humans had spent 3 centuries preparing for exactly this moment. And they had no idea what humanity had become in the cold darkness between the stars. The outer defense platforms of the Terran sector had been built by the Zephyrians 2 centuries ago. They were massive structures, each one the size of a small city, equipped with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Nothing had ever passed them without authorization, until now. Admiral Zexkar watched his command screens in growing disbelief. The approaching object had finally come close enough for detailed scans, and what they revealed should have been impossible. The ship, and it was definitely a ship, was not just large. It was a mobile city, a floating world of metal and energy that dwarfed anything in known space. "Sir," his weapons officer reported, "the defense platforms are trying to get target locks, but their sensors can't penetrate the ship's hull. It's like it's absorbing all active scans." Zexkar studied the readings. The human vessel was decelerating from near light speed with a grace that defied physics. No ship should be able to make such precise course corrections at that velocity. The engineering required was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Open a communication channel," he ordered. "Let's see who we're dealing with." The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of what appeared to be a ship's bridge. But everything about it was wrong. The surfaces seemed to be made of materials that shifted and flowed like liquid metal. The lighting came from sources that couldn't be identified. And at the center of it all sat a figure in what might have been a command chair. The figure was humanoid, but somehow more than human. Admiral Sarah Chen appeared to be middle-aged, but her eyes held the weight of centuries. Her uniform was simple, but made from materials that seemed to bend light around them. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded respect across the vast emptiness between galaxies. "This is Admiral Chen of the United Earth Ship Retribution," she said calmly. "We are returning to our home galaxy. Please move your defense platforms out of our path." Admiral Zexkar found his voice. "This is Admiral Zexkar of the Galactic Defense Force. You are approaching restricted space. Identify your intentions and submit to inspection." Chen's expression didn't change. "Our intentions are our own business. As for inspection, Admiral, I suggest you look at your sensors and reconsider that request." Zexkar glanced at his displays. The human ship was still several hours away, but already his most sensitive instruments were detecting energy readings that made no sense. The vessel's power output was beyond measurement. More disturbing, it seemed to be generating fields that his science officer couldn't identify. "Admiral Chen," he said carefully, "your ship appears to be using technology unknown to galactic science." You must insist on nothing," Chen interrupted, her voice still calm but carrying an edge that made Zexkar's skin crawl. "We have been away from home for a long time, Admiral. We are tired, and we are not in the mood for bureaucracy." The transmission ended abruptly. Zexkar stared at the blank screen for a moment, then turned to his tactical officer. "Status of the defense platforms?" "Sir, they're shutting down." "What do you mean, shutting down?" His officer's voice was confused. "The platforms are powering down their weapon systems. All of them, simultaneously. It's like they're being commanded by some external signal." Zexkar felt cold fear settling in his stomach. The defense platforms were supposed to be impossible to hack. Their systems were isolated, their programming locked behind multiple layers of security. No outside force should be able to affect them. "Sir," his communications officer's voice was urgent. "I'm receiving reports from across the sector. The human ship is broadcasting on all frequencies. Put it through." Admiral Chen's voice filled the bridge of every ship in the sector. "To all vessels in this region of space, we are the survivors of Earth, returning home after 300 years in exile. We bear no ill will toward most of you. However, we have business with the Zephyrian Empire. All non-Zephyrian vessels are advised to withdraw to safe distance." The message was repeated in 47 different languages, including some that hadn't been spoken in centuries. Zexkar activated his fleet communications. "All ships, this is Fleet Command. Maintain positions and prepare for possible hostile action." But even as he gave the order, he watched his sensors track the human ship's approach. The vessel was slowing down, but its size and power signature were growing more impressive with each passing hour. Whatever the humans had become during their exile, they were no longer the primitive species the Zephyrians had tried to destroy. His science officer looked up from her console. "Admiral, I'm detecting additional signatures. The human ship isn't alone." The display updated to show dozens of smaller vessels emerging from behind the massive ship. Each one was still larger than most galactic warships, and they moved with the same impossible precision as their flagship. "How many ships are we looking at?" Zexkar asked. Initial count shows at least 200 vessels of various sizes. Sir, some of them are reading as mobile shipyards and construction facilities. It's like they brought their entire civilization with them. The tactical implications hit Zexkar like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just survived in the void between galaxies. They had built a mobile civilization capable of traveling between stars. The engineering and organizational skills required for such an achievement were staggering. Sir, incoming message from Galactic Command. The face of Supreme Admiral Korthmax appeared on screen. The Zephyrian scales were darker than usual, a sign of extreme stress. Admiral Zexkar, what is your assessment of the human fleet? Zexkar chose his words carefully. Sir, we are facing technology and capabilities that exceed our current understanding. The humans have clearly undergone significant advancement during their time in exile. Are they a threat to the Empire? Zexkar looked at his sensor displays, showing the massive human fleet approaching with casual confidence while his own defense platforms remained mysteriously offline. Sir, I believe they could be a significant threat to anyone they choose to target. There was a long pause. Admiral, you will withdraw your forces to Kepler Station and await further orders. We are assembling the home fleet to deal with this situation. The transmission ended, leaving Zexkar alone with his thoughts. The home fleet was the most powerful military force in the galaxy, with over 5,000 ships and weapons capable of destroying entire solar systems. If the Zephyrians were mobilizing it, they were taking the human threat very seriously. But as he watched the human vessels continue their stately approach, Zexkar couldn't shake the feeling that the home fleet might not be enough. The humans had spent 3 centuries preparing for this moment. They had survived in conditions that should have killed them, built technology that surpassed galactic science, and maintained their civilization across the impossible distances of intergalactic space. What kind of enemy had the Zephyrians created when they tried to destroy humanity? And what did these returned humans plan to do with the power they had clearly developed? As his fleet began its withdrawal, Zexkar noticed something that chilled him to the bone. The human ships weren't following his forces or making any aggressive moves. They were simply continuing on their course toward the inner galaxy, moving with the patience of beings who had already waited 3 centuries for this moment. They weren't conquerors rushing to claim territory. They were executioners, calmly approaching their appointment with justice, and nothing in the galaxy was going to stop them. Supreme Admiral Korthmax stood on the bridge of the ZES Dominion, the flagship of the Zephyrian home fleet. Around him, the most powerful armada in galactic history prepared for battle. 5,000 ships filled the space near the Nexus system, their weapons charged and ready. Each vessel represented centuries of Zephyrian military engineering and conquest. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, long-range sensors show the human fleet maintaining course toward our position. Estimated time to contact, 6 hours. Korthmax studied the display showing both fleets. The humans had perhaps 300 ships to his 5,000. The odds should have been overwhelming in his favor. But something about the approaching formation made his warrior instincts scream warnings. The human ships moved too precisely. They maintained perfect formation despite traveling at speeds that should have made such coordination impossible. More disturbing, his sensors still couldn't get clear readings on their weapons or defensive systems. What's the status of our intelligence gathering? He asked his science officer. Sir, we've been scanning the human fleet for 3 days now. Our most advanced sensors can determine their approximate size and mass, but everything else is unclear. It's like their hulls are designed to absorb or redirect our scanning attempts. Admiral Chen's voice suddenly filled the bridge of every Zephyrian ship. Supreme Admiral Korthmax of the Zephyrian Empire. My name is Sarah Chen. 300 years ago, your people came to my world with the intention of destroying my species. You failed. The communication was coming from across several light hours of distance, yet it arrived with perfect clarity. No known technology could maintain such signal strength over that range. I am prepared to discuss terms for the surrender of your fleet, Chen continued. You have 1 hour to respond. The bridge fell silent. Several officers looked at their Supreme Admiral in shock. The humans were outnumbered more than 15 to 1, yet they were demanding surrender. Korthmax activated the fleet communication system. This is Supreme Admiral Korthmax of the Zephyrian Empire. You are vastly outnumbered and facing the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. The response came instantly. Admiral, you seem to be operating under the assumption that numbers matter. In precisely 4 hours and 37 minutes, you will understand why they don't. The transmission ended. Korthmax turned to his staff officers, his scaled face showing the confidence that had won him 100 battles. All ships prepare for combat. We'll show these returned primitives what 3 centuries of military advancement looks like. But privately, he wondered why Admiral Chen had been so specific about the timing. 4 hours later, the two fleets faced each other across a distance of 10 million kilometers. The Zephyrian armada formed a massive battle line, their ships arranged in the classical formations that had conquered half the galaxy. The human fleet maintained a simple, almost casual formation, with their largest ships at the center and smaller vessels spread in what looked like a sphere. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, "all ships report ready for battle. Weapons charged, shields at maximum." Korthmax nodded. "Signal the attack. All ships open fire." 5,000 Zephyrian warships unleashed their fury simultaneously. Plasma beams that could melt mountains, quantum torpedoes that could crack planets, and reality-warping weapons that could turn matter inside out filled the space between the fleets. The combined firepower was enough to sterilize a dozen worlds. The weapons struck the human formation and simply disappeared. "What happened?" Korthmax demanded. "Why didn't our weapons detonate?" His science officer stared at her instruments in confusion. "Sir, the energy readings show that our weapons reached their targets, but then the signatures just stopped. It's like the human ships absorbed everything we threw at them." Before Korthmax could respond, the human fleet opened fire. The weapons that emerged from the human ships defied everything the Zephyrians understood about physics. They weren't energy beams or projectiles. They were something that seemed to reach out across space and simply touch the Zephyrian vessels. The first ship to be hit was the heavy cruiser ZS Conquest. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the ship began to come apart at the molecular level. It didn't explode or burn. It simply dissolved, its atoms separating and drifting apart like dust in the wind. "Shields up," Korthmax shouted, but it was too late. Whatever the human weapons were, they passed through Zephyrian shields like they weren't there. Ship after ship began to dissolve. The mighty dreadnought Z's Terror, veteran of 100 campaigns, touched by a beam of pale light and ceased to exist. The battlecruiser Z's Vengeance tried to retreat, but something reached out across millions of kilometers and gently unmade it. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Korthmax ordered. "Random jump patterns." But the human weapons didn't miss. They moved faster than light, ignoring the laws of physics that limited conventional weapons. Distance meant nothing to them. Shields and armor provided no protection. In the space of 4 minutes, 2,000 Zephyrian ships simply stopped existing. Not destroyed, not damaged, erased as if they had never been built. "Sir," his communications officer's voice was panicked. "I'm receiving surrender requests from across the fleet." Korthmax watched in horror as another wave of human weapons reached out to touch his remaining ships. The ZES Dominator, pride of the Zephyrian Navy, dissolved like sugar in rain. The carrier ZES Supremacy tried to launch its fighters, but both the carrier and its aircraft were unmade before the launch bays could open. "Admiral Chen," he said into his communicator, his voice shaking. "We surrender. Please stop the attack." The weapons fire ceased immediately. In the sudden silence, Korthmax could hear the panicked reports from his surviving ships. In less than 5 minutes, the most powerful fleet in galactic history had been reduced to less than 3,000 ships, and those only because the humans had chosen to stop firing. Admiral Chen's face appeared on his main screen. She looked exactly as she had hours before, calm, patient, and completely untouched by the battle that had just reshaped galactic power. "Supreme Admiral," she said quietly, "your people came to Earth believing that might makes right. You taught the galaxy that the strong could destroy the weak without consequence. Thank you for that lesson. We learned it well." Behind her, through the viewing ports of her ship, Korthmax could see the human fleet. They hadn't moved from their original positions. They had fought and won the greatest space battle in galactic history without breaking formation. "What do you want from us?" he asked. "Justice," Chen replied. "Your empire will withdraw from all occupied territories. Your military will be reduced to system defense forces only, and you will pay reparations to the species you attempted to destroy." She paused, her ancient eyes holding his gaze. "The galaxy will know that there are consequences for genocide, and if we refuse?" Chen's expression didn't change. Then we will demonstrate what 3 centuries of preparation can accomplish when humans are truly motivated. She leaned forward slightly. Admiral, we haven't shown you our real weapons yet. What you just witnessed was a gentle reminder of our capabilities. The communication ended, leaving Korthmax alone with the wreckage of his fleet and the knowledge that everything had changed. The Zephyrian Empire, conqueror of worlds and destroyer of species, had been humbled in minutes by the very people they thought they had eliminated. As his surviving ships began their retreat, Korthmax realized that the galaxy now had new masters. The humans hadn't just survived their exile, they had used it to become something far beyond what they had been. And they had returned not as refugees seeking shelter, but as judges delivering long-delayed justice. The age of Zephyrian dominance was over. The age of human justice had begun. The Zephyrian homeworld of Kethmore had never known defeat. For over 1,000 years, it had been the center of an empire that stretched across 2/3 of the galaxy. Its orbital defense platforms could destroy entire fleets, and its planetary shields could withstand the combined fire of 100 warships. None of that mattered when the UES Retribution arrived. The massive human vessel appeared in the system without warning, somehow bypassing detection networks that should have spotted it from light years away. It took a stable orbit just outside the range of the planetary defenses and waited. No weapons were fired. No threats were made. The ship simply sat there like a patient predator, while the greatest civilization in the galaxy tried to figure out what to do about it. Emperor Zorthkol stood in his palace command center, surrounded by military advisors and government officials. Through the massive windows, he could see the human ship hanging in space like a dark moon, its hull absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Your Majesty, General Vexthul reported, our defense platforms are unable to get target locks. The ship's hull seems to interfere with our targeting systems. Then fire without locks, the Emperor ordered. Destroy it. Sir, we tried. Our most powerful weapons simply stop working when they get close to the human ship. It's like it has some kind of field that neutralizes energy. Emperor Zorthkul stared out at the alien vessel. 3 days had passed since the destruction of the home fleet, and reports were coming in from across the Empire. Zephyrian forces were surrendering without fighting. Occupied worlds were declaring independence. The government structure that had taken centuries to build was collapsing in a matter of days, all because of one ship and its crew of returned humans. Your Majesty, his communications minister announced, we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel. Put it through. Admiral Chen appeared on the main screen, looking exactly as composed as she had during her previous communications. Behind her, the bridge of her ship hummed with quiet efficiency. Human crew members moved about their duties with the calm confidence of people who had faced impossible challenges and overcome them. Emperor Zorthkul, she said without preamble, I am Admiral Sarah Chen, commander of the human fleet and representative of the United Earth government in exile. We need to talk. The Emperor drew himself up to his full height, trying to project the authority that had once commanded respect from half the galaxy. You have attacked our forces and invaded our space. We do not negotiate with terrorists. Chen's expression didn't change. Your Majesty, 3 centuries ago your empire attempted to commit genocide against my species. You failed, but not for lack of trying. We are not here as terrorists. We are here as representatives of justice. She gestured to someone off-screen, and the display changed to show archived footage from the Zephyrian attack on Earth. The Emperor watched his own forces approaching the human homeworld, expecting to find billions of victims for their cleansing campaign. When your fleet arrived at Earth, you found it empty. You assumed we had fled in panic and died in space. You were wrong on both counts. The display showed images of massive construction projects in the dark void between galaxies, ships being built on scales that defied imagination, entire cities floating in the emptiness powered by technologies that hadn't existed 3 centuries before. We didn't flee, Your Majesty. We evacuated. Every human, every piece of technology, every scrap of knowledge and culture. We took our entire civilization and moved it to a place where we could prepare for our return. Emperor Zorthkol felt cold dread settling in his stomach. What do you want? Justice, Chen replied simply. Your empire will release all occupied territories. You will pay reparations to the species you have oppressed. Your military will be reduced to planetary defense forces only, and you will stand trial for crimes against sapient life. And if we refuse? Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of centuries. Your Majesty, in the void between galaxies, we had nothing but time. Time to grow, to learn, to develop technologies that your civilization cannot understand. Time to build weapons that make your entire military look like children playing with toys. The display changed again, showing deep space sensors pointed at the Zephyrian homeworld. We know about the Nova bombs hidden in your system's star. We know about the doomsday weapons in your planet's core. We know about every desperate measure your people have prepared in case of defeat. The Emperor's blood ran cold. Those were the most classified secrets in the Empire, known only to a handful of officials. None of them will work against us, Chen continued calmly. We have technologies that can reach through dimensions, weapons that can rewrite the fundamental forces of physics. We can unmake your star or rebuild it as we choose. We can move your entire planet to another galaxy if we decide it would serve justice. She leaned forward slightly, but we don't want to do any of those things. We're not here for revenge, Your Majesty. We're here to make sure that what happened to us never happens to anyone else. The transmission paused as the Emperor tried to process what he was hearing. The humans weren't just technologically superior. They had become something beyond his understanding. Beings who could manipulate the basic forces of reality itself. You have 24 hours to consider our terms, Chen said finally. After that, we will begin implementing justice in our own way. The transmission ended, leaving the Emperor alone with his advisors and the knowledge that his empire was finished. Outside the windows, the human ship waited with infinite patience, like death itself made manifest. 23 hours later, the Zephyrian Empire officially surrendered. The announcement was broadcast across the galaxy, along with the full terms of the human demands. Occupied worlds celebrated their freedom. Oppressed species finally saw hope for justice. The galaxy watched in amazement as the most powerful empire in known space submitted to the will of a species they had thought extinct. Admiral Chen kept her word. Zephyrian forces were withdrawn from occupied territories without incident. War criminals were arrested and put on trial. Reparations began flowing to the species that had suffered under Zephyrian rule, and through it all, the human fleet remained visible but peaceful, their ships serving as quiet reminders of what could happen to those who chose oppression over justice. Dr. Vextar, watching from his monitoring station, compiled his final report on the human return. His conclusion was simple but profound. Humanity had not just survived their exile. They had used it to become the guardians the galaxy had never known it needed. The UES Retribution disappeared from Zephyrian space as mysteriously as it had arrived, but it left behind a single probe in orbit around the homeworld. The probe broadcast a simple message on all frequencies, a message that would be remembered across the galaxy for generations to come. We are still human. We still remember what it means to be human. But we also remember what it means to survive. The next time someone threatens innocent life, we won't need to come home first. We are always watching. We are always ready. And we will never again allow genocide to succeed. The galaxy had learned that humans could be patient beyond measure, could survive impossible conditions, and could become more than anyone imagined when pushed to the edge of extinction. But most importantly, it had learned that some species, when faced with annihilation, don't just survive. They evolve into something that makes sure annihilation never happens again. The age of unchecked conquest was over. The age of enforced justice had begun. And somewhere in the dark spaces between the stars, the guardians of humanity watched and waited, ensuring that the galaxy would never again forget the price of attempting genocide. The humans had come home. And nothing would ever be the same.